Ladies and gentlemen, this is the state of the scene.
Yo, what the fuck is up, Warp Tour? The state of the scene at SOTS Podcast on all social media. Sam here with Marcos.
Where are you? Was that good?
That was low-key. Low-key, that was good.
Indistinguishable, right?
Literally.
Could have been the real thing.
Am I sitting next to Tom DeLonge right now?
I feel like Tom.
I'm sweating.
Body of a 50-year-old.
Hey.
Well, respectfully.
Respectfully. I'm going to get this out of the way early, honestly. As always, every link you need is in the description of this episode, including our social playlist, merch, and Discord. Subscribe to us on YouTube at SOTS Podcast YT and leave a thumbs up if you're watching the video version of this podcast. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave 5 stars. And if you want to support the show, consider becoming a patron for early access, stickers, Discord benefits, producer credits, and our video content, and the ability to ask questions on the weekly show. Marcus, this week's data discourse is absolutely fucking insane. Like, it's just like on paper, it's just like, I'm going to look
There's
back.
a term for this. It's fever dream.
Yes.
That's what this is.
I'm going to look back like 3 years from now and try to decipher what the fuck was happening in the seed when this episode happened. You know what I mean? I'm just going to be like, okay, so back in October of 2023, the hardcore community and the furry community were going at each other's throats. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay.
And
sure.
like, that's almost underselling it. Like, there was some absolute fucking threads going on with some crazy ass replies.
Yeah, fucking, you know, like I've always said, hardest community there is, furries, and then hardcore. During a recent set by hardcore adjacent band From Joy, a crowd killer hit another individual in the pit.
This is on video. And like, man, that crowd killer lined up their shot.
He fucking Ryu'd Street Fighter fucking finished them with like a single punch. It was insane.
You could like see them adjust their footing and then like fix the crosshairs on the fist.
Bro, you could see him mouth the word like Hadoken.
I don't know. And obviously lands a punch on this individual who goes by Latte.
Who was wearing their furry ensemble, like they had like the mask, like the head on.
They were in character. Someone correct us in the comments.
Yeah, let's set us straight on everything revolving around the hardcore and/or furry community that we get incorrect in this.
But important to note, yes, like
we're partial observers.
Wearing
impartial observers.
Wearing the furry attire. Not just like a shirt that says
they
like
were
furry and proud.
Furred up. They were like there's no mistaking they were a furry. Like there was no confusing
furred up is
them
actually bars
for not a furry. Right. So Latte, the furry who was attacked in this instance, put a statement on their GoFundMe, which they later launched to pay for medical bills. Link for that in the summary of this episode. On Saturday, I was assaulted at a concert in Austin. I was punched from behind in the head while watching the show. The person who hit me fractured the lower part of my orbital socket, concussed me, and has jeopardized my job and vision. So, like, initially when this video came out, right? So the Discord on this has been a fucking ride, right? The original video shows Latte wearing a wolf's mask.
Watching the show.
Vibing in the pit, right? So this wasn't a case where they were like at the bar and you know, like they were in the pit, right? They're in an area where you have the potential to get punched.
We're in the strike zone, right? We're in the strike zone.
That's precisely correct. And the assailant clearly takes a well-considered intentional swing at their head, right? It's not like they were looking to the left, swinging their arm backwards, and connected with a person that they didn't see, right? Which is every show in the fucking hardcore space. This one felt extremely intentional, right? Is what it is. I'm sure that happens a lot too, for what it's worth. The video posted by another Twitter user with the caption, "Dog, this is funny as hell," has since been updated with a community note that reads, "For added context."
I just can't believe it starts with the words dog. Like DAWG.
You're right. It's almost like too intentional. It's like there's a cleverness here.
I just didn't catch that initially.
Community note reads, for added context to this incident, the assaulted suitor is said to have been seriously injured by the hit with possible brain damage or skull fractures. So FromJoy like initially reposted the video, and then there was another edit somebody did that dropped their logo over like the entirety of the video. And to like be fair, on surface level, this really does just look like every fucking hard video I see from one of these shows where somebody just, they take a fucking hit, right? And usually for the most part, they like, you know, get picked back up and the fucking show goes on. And this is the fucking culture, right? This is the culture. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And the hardcore community has made it very well known after this incident included that like every single time somebody gets upset about this, if you don't want to get hit, don't stand in the pit. Go outside to the parking lot, get back in your car and go home. So then from there, like after FromJoy like initially like reposted that video, they later followed up by donating to the victims GoFundMe when they later posted on Twitter. And Latte has since asked that the negative energy that's generally been directed at the band would be better suited like finding the person who did this, right?
Sure.
That was sort of their ask, right? So like initially this was just like, hey, it's another video. Maybe this one a little more flashy because the person happened to be wearing like a wolf mask.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, like I've seen 2,500 videos that play out exactly like this one. The catch is here that it does seem a little bit more intentional. And of course, there was a pretty significant injury sustained. And of course, now we gain clarity to the consequences where this individual, you know, their job is in jeopardy because they can't actually perform the scope of their work.
Right.
And obviously it's a very sobering thing to see, which is why I obviously like FromJoy has since walked back the initial tweet where they're like,
yeah, though to be fair, and a lot of people have sort of acknowledged this as well, like it's maybe you go in hindsight, okay, FromJoy, like did you make sure the individual was okay? It's like, I don't know, they're hardcore shows. Like I'm not gonna hold the band responsible for somebody who's moshing, you know what I mean? Like if you want to get upset with somebody, get upset with the fucking crowd killer, which
I don't know, bro, to be fair,
what
I was gonna say, like it's like watching like a toddler fall, and initially it's like, is that kid dead, or are they gonna stand back up? It's not like
their eyeball popped out in the moment and there was like a fucking crime scene there, right?
Well, right, that specifically, but I mean, like think of every show that we've gone to where you saw a crowd killer hit someone and like the person ends up being fine, and it's like you don't always know. Like that's why I say like the toddler thing. Like, is the kid gonna stand back up and laugh it off? Like,
here's the thing, and I think this is the biggest part of that, is that you and I, this community, the alternative scene, is relatively numb to these types of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You see somebody get hit at a hardcore show and it's like, I hope they're okay, but it's also par for the course.
Right.
You then pull that and a different community who is unfamiliar with the culture sees it and they have a completely different response to it, and you almost can't even you can't even blame them for the response they have, right?
Yeah.
So the furry community initially was, and in some senses still are, and understand everyone when I say this community and that community, I'm not encapsulating every single individual who feels like they are a part of it. I'm saying, the people we're seeing within this discourse sharing their thoughts, called for an assailant to be named and face charges, as well as FromJoy to disband. So, I mean, a lot of people were really upset with FromJoy right at the top from the furry community. God, it's just like, again, the more I say these things, the more like words feel like they just lose all meaning to me.
Man, they're a bit cutthroat.
But it's like it's context. You know what I mean? It's like you just see a video of someone who like maybe
he's punching someone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then like I'm not exactly sure how popular Latte is on like Twitter, but let's say they have like somewhat of a decent following and like a lot of other people in the community pick it up, then suddenly it just feels like, because some people were saying it was targeted, right? It's my understanding Latte is trans, so people are like, oh well, this is transphobic. Like there's like people are now starting to put like additional like context on top of it. People are saying is From Joy transphobic because of this, right?
I could see the argument that it is. I was going to say furry phobic, but that also doesn't feel appropriate to say. But as far as like, I think you
create a target on your back, for better or worse, that might not inspire hatred, but from the initial start of this, hey, isn't this funny, guys, that somebody wearing a wolf mask got punched in the pit?
Well, I think it's also like, like that you're naturally attracted to seeing someone who does not look like the rest of the people in the crowd, not because they are trans, but because they are wearing a mask or whatever.
Right. Like you stand out, so you end up getting hit. It's not you deserve to get hit. It might be that the individual is hateful though. I can't. No, this part. It's not like the assailant has come forward, by the way. So it's not like.
So the assailant's not masked. The assailant, as far as we know, also not a furry. I'm surprised this day and age that they haven't figured out who it is.
Well, part of this is as well is that like, nobody within the hardcore community is rushing to call the cops so we can figure out this whole situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't.
But you're right. This person will not come forward either.
Right. Because at this point, why would you? Unless you want to be the bigger person, I suppose, because maybe you should be covering those medical bills, because it's like, once again, it's one thing to be like you got hit in the pit, and it's another thing to kind of watch this video and just see this guy intentionally line up and punch this person in the head.
Back.
But I don't know, because I feel like every time somebody puts forward these kinds of criticisms, like the hardcore community immediately comes back and they're like, this you just don't understand. This is shows, and it's like, all right, well, fucking, I don't know, maybe I don't understand. It's like, I don't generally see most of these bands, right? I see all the ones that kind of cross over into our space. Not technically, we did review From Joy, but I don't know like the makeup of that entire bill.
When the fuck did we review From Joy?
Oh no, we didn't review From Joy. Okay,
we've listened.
I listened to that From Joy album, but I don't think we actually ever talked about it on the show. But it's like, man, going and like reading these comments on top, like one individual from the furry community posted, A, put the guy in jail. B, financially support the girl. C, do not go to From Joy concerts. Do not let them perform at your venue. Do not give them a record label. # canceled. # cancel From Joy. So it's like, and it's like, man, it's not surprising, because this is how every fucking like heated narrative goes on Twitter, is that like you just see like the both ends of the spectrum.
Those
and they
are the hashtags
like
all
wild.
the time. Yeah.
And then it's like, man, and then I'm reading comments from the hardcore community, and I read something like, one individual posted, "Furries know as much about hardcore as hardcore kids know about furries." So this person's always coming in like level-headed. They're like, guys,
fucking brilliant.
There's just different types of peoples, like different walks of the world. It's like, we got hardcores over, we got furries over there. It's like, in you there are two wolves.
It is. That Venn diagram is so insane, though.
I know,
because we at least know one person falls in both.
Furries, hardcore,
Latte's right in the middle.
Right. They go on to say, crowd killing is good and fun. This is what I mean. I don't understand either community. I don't get either of them. Furries are not about kinks. It's a weird transition.
It's a really sharp transition.
Yeah, there's a percentage of furries that do weird shit, but they're the exception, not the rule. Just like there are some hardcore kids that do some shit they shouldn't. If
Twitter's like character limit wasn't as strict as it is, this individual would almost come out as a furry at the very end of this and be like, and I think there should be more furries in the hardcore community.
The magic ending this is his sailor comes forward, he pays these medical bills, and 3 years later he's like, I didn't realize it at the time, but I too am a furry.
Did a lot of reading.
But it's just like, on paper, it's just like you read, all right, it's like I'm just scrolling Twitter, and it's like, the hardcore community and the furry community needs to stop now before this goes any further. It's like, what the fuck is happening? happening right now?
Before we can't go back.
What are we talking about right now?
It is like, man,
This for me is peak Mosh discourse, right? Nothing will ever beat this.
Nothing will ever beat this. People talk about like, oh, that wasn't on my bingo card for the year. It's like, this wasn't in my dimensions bingo, like assortment.
My
of
guy,
bingo
you can't
cards.
write this.
Well, yeah, this
You
is
can't
so
write
fucking
this.
insane. I'm curious if like we will start to see one of two things happen: is more people out of like solidarity show up to hardcore shows in their fursonas, I think is what it might be called, or
Sounds right.
alternatively, people dress in their fursonas and then start protesting from Joy shows and other hardcore shows at their local venues. Because I need to see these videos.
Just a million branching paths.
Just a million branching paths.
Once again, that GoFundMe link is in the summary of this episode.
Yeah,
they met their goal already, but you know, who knows? They kind of said that like, hey, hopefully, you know, some steroids and this like doctor thinks this could clear itself up and I won't need like any surgeries or anything like that. But you know, medical stuff is never like certain.
Does a fucking orbital fracture just naturally heal?
Me, I don't.
I mean,
know.
I guess it's a
I don't know.
fracture.
I don't honestly know.
Latte speedy recovery though.
Yeah, I mean, there's nobody actually. I'd say nobody actually wants to see somebody get hurt, and I think
No, of course
generally
not.
that's what the hardcore community is saying. It's like, hey, this is all sort of good fun, but then it's like, I don't know. This one individual guy kind of seemed like he just sort of went a step too far, but it's like fucking criticizing that community is just like a good opportunity to get yourself yelled at a million times. Another wonderful dated discourse, Marcos. Just a wealth of discussion coming from Tesseract this week, and specifically their drummer Jay Pastone, who came under criticism for creating a separate digital tip jar for the band after finding an imbalance in relation to how much money the merch seller was making in tips versus the band. Here's a piece from Jay's original statement that they posted on Instagram. From speaking with fans, we know some of you thought you were tipping the band. Firstly, thank you. Secondly, we apologize that your tip hasn't reached us. We didn't have vision of the system/culture until now. This is my way of learning that Tesseract is apparently not an American band, by the way, or from a country where tipping is like normal. I guess I'm assuming they're like fucking European or some shit.
Do they not have tips at merch tables in Europe? That's the most surprising thing for me. Like, if you're an American band and you go over to Europe, are you like shunned by that community?
I have no fucking idea.
If you put like a tip jar out?
Europe's like, it might as well be Narnia to me. You know what I mean? Like, who knows what the fuck goes on over there? From speaking to peers, we have discovered that some merch sellers are generating in excess of $30,000 in tips over the course of a 5 to 6 week tour.
What bands those people are selling merch for? Mm-hmm. Metallica,
the
Taylor
1975.
Swift. My Chemical Romance, baby.
U2.
Right.
Jay goes on to say, which is insane. No one else on a tour.
Yeah, it is insane, Jay.
At our level makes anything close to this. The band members certainly do not. The other crew members are on agreed fees, nowhere close to this.
What's your initial like gut reaction to this?
My initial so there were like so when I posted this, right? So many people were like, "You dumb bitch. You stupid fucking
To
bitch."
us?
No.
Oh.
To this guy.
Okay.
Who the fuck thought the band was getting those tips? Me a little bit, to be honest.
No.
I always thought when I threw the money into the tip jar, it was just kind of going to like feed the band crew merch people kind of like pool of money.
So I'm sort of there with you.
And I'm not like upset to find out that's not the case. It
depends who you're seeing. Like, I remember like the fact that you would see the band members working the merch table most of the night.
I'm seeing Taylor Swift in this. In this
Sure.
instance. I thought the money was going directly to her.
Right, but like if you're like worked and you're like walking past a tent and it's like someone who's clearly not in the band and they have a tip jar out that says this money's going to weed and my dog and cereal and shit like that. Like that's, I know that's just going to the merch seller.
You're right. There are contextual ways that I could read it differently. But also like if somebody just tells me, yeah, no, the merch person just gets all the tips. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I guess it's like a service job. So like, why wouldn't they? That makes sense to me. The other part that immediately jumps out is obviously seeing that 30K and being like,
where the fuck is this clown getting his numbers from?
Does any band that is listening to this show need a merch person fucking tomorrow?
I'm available year round. I'll gladly work more than 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, like I'll just keep bouncing from tour to tour and make a clean 500K by the end of the year. No problem. I'll do that job all day. So like since then he and the band have like apologized, so the band had to like be also like we're doing the communication for moving forward. They deleted the QR code that led to the digital tip jar. They said that bit caused confusion and merch sellers are working hard, as are the band and crew, and whether they tour with us or join us locally, they are an extremely valued member of our team.
Excellent work, ChatGPT, for spitting out that garbage of a fucking statement, dude.
That's funny. You gotta think the vibes are a little weird moving forward if you're selling merch for Tesseract.
Yeah.
Like they invite you out to dinner, but then they kind of like wait to see if you pick up the check that night, you know? The fucking 30K. How much merch is fucking Tesseract sell? Like what?
I need.
Where did they get these numbers?
I need the actual like tell-all from the person currently slinging merch for this band.
You know what's funny is that the person currently selling merch for this band didn't chime in, but a lot of people who have done that did chime in, and it was more so to say, yeah, we deserve these tips. Like we're doing a million things. Like we're loading all this fucking like merch up to sell. We're hanging out all
a lot
night.
of the stuff
We're
you don't
interacting
typically
with
think
fans
of.
constantly.
Lugging all the boxes into the venue.
Right. We're there till the end of the night. It's not like merch packs up early and gets out of there. You know what I mean? It's just I think that in a sense, Tesseract maybe thought, okay, you know what? Maybe people want to tip the merch person and us. You know what I mean? But on its face, it's hard not to look at this and be like, you're kind of just navigating them away from the tips they would have given the merch person and being like, just send that money directly to us.
Right. I need this money to go to Jay.
It'd be crazy if moving forward you saw like 3 tip jars on every merch table and it's like you're just sitting there with your 5 and you're like, do I give it to the band, the crew, or the merch?
5-head merch slingers right now putting out those 3 tip jars and being like, these tips go to little old me.
Yeah.
But that bigger tip jar goes directly to the front man.
I think the funniest comment I saw about this whole thing came from Ryan from Fit for a King, who I think he quote tweeted and he was like, then go be a merch person.
Right.
It's just like, fair point.
Yep.
But this for me is like all of this time we've spent all year talking about merch cuts for bands to then go and ask for their merch cut from the person on their team selling merch just feels like
that this guy had a rudimentary like misunderstanding as to what the merch cut meant this whole fucking time. And then he's like, yo, I thought we played a Live Nation venue tonight. What happened?
We're supposed to get cut of these tips? What the fuck? Once again, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/SOTS podcast. You can also ask questions on our weekly show, like Ava, who wants to know if you could direct a music video for a song, even if it already has one, which song would it be?
This is a crazy question.
Here's where I went to instinctually.
Okay.
I was trying to think of a music video I couldn't fucking stand. So I could like just film something entirely different. You know what I mean? Here's the first one that comes to mind. And it's only because like it keeps auto playing after you and I watch videos on YouTube, and every time you let out like the loudest groan, and it's that fucking new While She Sleeps video. It's like
the Target ad. Yeah.
I'm cutting out everyone who's not in the band. Like all of it's getting left on the cutting room floor.
Yes.
And then I've just got a really clean video with a really fun and energetic band to watch. And none of this fucking T-Mobile sidekick TikTok dance bullshit that we get for like the vast majority of the fucking video.
Yes.
Fucking just cleaning that shit up.
Yes, sir.
But another idea I had also was, is there any video you can think that would be fun to like go back and like remaster?
So this is gonna sound insane, bro. I could have saved a band's career.
You could have saved a band's whole fucking career. Tesseract?
Palisades, dog.
Oh,
that first video with Brandon on vocals of just like the most like sterile environment, sterile perform. I would have had that band fucking sweating, throwing up by the end of the fucking shoot.
Right.
To ensure that they're like, this is me Doctor Stranging the timeline, going back and fixing things.
Right. I like where your head's at.
Like I'm back
this
there
one.
with the Infinity Stones saving this band's ass.
You're not fixing a music video. You're saving someone.
Right.
Like you're doing important work.
And I
right
don't even know
now.
what I would just do better than whatever the fuck the fucking stupid Unreal Engine stupid fucking background shit it's been like. I'm fumbling over my words, like tripping over my words.
Because you have such a visceral reaction to this style of video that we've just been inundated with and has grown tiresome.
That Palisades one was like the first one where like I immediately noticed how much I do hate it.
It was that, and for me it was also one that I got from Drag Me Down, where I was just like, I've never watched a more lifeless music video in my life.
And it completely squashed all the hype you had for that record. Yeah.
100%.
Videos I might redo though. I don't know. I can't really think of any.
I'm just trying to think, like, if you go back to like an old enough video, like early enough in a band's career, if you had like the opportunity to kind of like redo it and like hot 4K with a fucking bigger budget, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure exactly who it is, but
I think what I immediately jumped to is going back to an era of a band I really liked and just trying to squeeze one more video out of them.
right, like
so
getting
immediately,
one last single.
Yeah, immediately I'm like, I want to go just do like an old Panic video with like Ryan Ross, you know?
Weirdly had the same band jump to
Right?
mind, which is crazy. And it's probably because that album, like that first one, like any song is like doable, right?
And we got like a fair amount of videos off that record, but like
you think of
I
like
could've done one
the
more.
3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, My Chemical Romance era, and how there were like 3 videos for an album that's literally flawless from start to finish, right? It's nuts.
That and like Black Parade, like we could have just found a way to make an excuse and do all of them.
That should be a fucking film, to be honest. Marcus, we checked out some new albums this week, some fucking big releases.
The Breakdown.
Starting with One More Time by BLINK-182.
No one gave a fuck that you this time. I won't be complacent. The dreams I gave up and wasted.
This is the California Trio's 9th studio album, released the 20th of October via Columbia Records. One More Time consists of 17 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2019's 9 LP, which is sequentially BLINK-182's 8th album, and also the last record to feature Alkaline Trio's Matt Skiba on vocals, of which he'd been providing since 2015 when longtime founding member Tom DeLonge originally departed the band. And believe it or not, it's been universally desired since 2015. He's back. Tom DeLonge is here. The favorite trio is back, and we have a brand new record.
So it's so interesting that I just don't trust everything you said about 9 being their 8th album.
So it's funny because it appears that they have already walked it back by calling this new record the 9th album, because 9 was, again, sequentially the 8th, but considered the 9th because they went back and considered their first demo tape an album.
Okay, all right. So it was like they were playing some fucked shit, and then like they changed their mind.
Or alternatively, they've erased 9 from the history books.
Why was 9 afraid?
One more time.
No,
Oh.
because 182.
Oh. And that's the review, everyone. Go check it out. It's out now.
So obviously the impetus for Tom coming back was kind of, Mark Hopiska, a cancer diagnosis in 2021, and the 3 original members of the band, Travis Barker included, reconvened, overcame sort of old trivial disputes, and DeLonge was like, fine, I'm back in the band. And then like one little other additional nugget of interest for this album is that it was the first, it's produced by Travis Barker, who has made a name for himself as a producer in the last few years for certain.
See, I thought you were going to say that Tom's UFO footage had been officially declassified by
Weirdly,
the US government.
Quiet around the alien conversation throughout the entirety of this album, and you have to wonder if they got some pushback from somebody. You have to wonder if Tom's on a list somewhere and they're like, you're gonna want to, like,
Careful.
Tom gets up in the morning, drink his coffee, he's looking out his front door, and there's just a black van parked. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Tread carefully.
right, that's precisely correct.
17 tracks on this bad boy.
If I am corrected by assumption, this is the second Blink-182 album you've heard in full?
Yes, sir. So it's this one. And it
Following
was
their
9.
8th studio album, 9? Yes.
So prior to this one, we were 0 for 1. Wasn't the biggest fan of 9.
Your Blink lore upsets me.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it makes me irritated.
I don't care, dog. So what's crazy is I was getting more and more excited about this project by this project being Blink-182.
Yeah. A little bit.
With all of the extracurricular activities Travis Barker's been up to over the years, mainly.
You're a Barker stan above a Blink-182 fan is almost fair to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Everyone's favorite boogeyman, MGK. I really liked all the stuff Travis Barker did on those last 2 albums.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been really enjoying those escapades. And it did ultimately make me sort of have an affinity for Blink-182 that I didn't have. Like, suddenly they had a member in the band that I just really liked.
And if I remember correctly, you told me you learned who Travis Barker was initially from watching the Kardashians?
Yes, that's so true.
Okay,
it's
I was just
exactly
checking.
what
I'm trying
happened.
to rework it in my mind
Yes.
right now. The irony to me, I think, is...
Also, boy, do I have a hot take for this review.
All right, hold on. Let me set you up. Let me set you up. I think this album, I think there is a nostalgia that is so deeply ingrained in this album that has such a integral, like it is for me, like it weighs heavily on my overall feelings towards this album, and I think a lot of people's feelings, and it's combined with the fact that Tom is finally back, and it's their first album together, the 3 of them, in fucking forever. And what's crazy to me is that I'm sitting here with someone who cannot intake any of it. So it's almost like it's this gigantic feature. It's almost like, for me, it's one of maybe one of the most critical, important aspects of this album is sort of the long-standing relationship with this band and the music they've put out over decades, and the fact that they're finally back together, and the way that, like, sonically it feels like they call back to so many different eras. And it's just like, for someone like yourself, completely lost on
Doesn't
you.
matter.
So you're just almost covered in this album. It might as well be Anthem Part 1, because you haven't heard the
I
other
was gonna ask, is there an Anthem and an Anthem 2?
Yes.
Really?
Fucking of course.
On which albums?
I know we've listened to some fucked bands who have done fuck shit in the past where they're just like, I Still Feel Her Part 4,
That's
and there was
mainly
never
why.
like a Part 1 through 3, you know what I mean? But no, this is legitimate.
Okay. All right. And what a way to start the record.
Right.
Was it as good as the first 2? I don't know.
Who can
I liked
say?
it.
You certainly cannot. So what's your hot take? Give me. I'm dying to know your hot take on this record.
So we'll kind of work our way into it, but like, I do want to
just
tell you
building
that
up
I
to it.
have arrived at a take I believe I consider to be hot, and I will be sharing that.
Okay.
So first things first, I really do enjoy this record.
Were you expecting to?
Kind of. I was really enjoying all the singles leading up to it. And again, suddenly like Travis, obviously in this band, really like Travis, was just looking forward to hearing it. And I think it mostly delivered on everything that was at least promised to me, who's a short-term fan, not like a long time fan anyway, a short time fan.
You are you're every band's dream, to be honest, that 30 years into their career, they're still finding new fans.
Sure. All right, I'll get to my hot take. Etching's this band's best song.
Etching, I don't even think Etching is the best song on this album. Like, I don't even know.
It's just
why.
It is just
what is it about Etching specifically
that's
got
such a good fucking energy? I don't know. I love this track. The fucking like the get the rope, like, all these fucking, it's just very memorable. And I think that there's a lot of songs on this record with a very similar energy, but just none of them have that grab in the same way this one does. And part of it's probably the video. Is there a furry in this video? It's a bunny, right?
Well, technically, there are lots of them, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so you're going into this album, and you gotta listen to 8 songs before you get to the cream of the crop.
Well, what I will tell you is One More Time is actually maybe one of the best tracks on this record, and I think it's one of the better tracks of the year. Etching came out last year, so I can get away with saying that.
Fair point.
One More Time, the title track, obviously, of this record is just absolutely fantastic, and it does put into great perspective the trials and tribulations that this band has overcome. Obviously, you know, the cancer diagnosis, Travis's near-death experience with the airplane crash.
Right.
And it's just a really powerful song. Like how it opens, from strangers to brothers to strangers again. Like it's just fucking poignant.
It's I think what's so crazy about this is that there are so many bands that you and I have listened to who are deep in their careers right now. And oftentimes it just feels like they've run out of things to say. But Blink-182's almost been like, and this is gonna sound
been
a little
around
weird.
so long that they've come full circle, and now they've got things to talk about again.
It came from tragedy, but in a weird sense, it feels like they've almost been gifted this incredible, like, conceptual nature to base the entire record around, that it's like finding a friendship from like after losing it for years, you know? It's like the story all happened and then it feeds this album, right? And it's like, in a sense, I think other bands would kill for that kind of like level of emotional depth to
I know what you
fuel
mean.
a record, right? So they don't gotta and what's funny is this album is not always constantly doing that, but even when it's not intentionally doing it, it still feels like it's doing it. You know what I mean? So when you get something like Turn This Off, which is like the dumbest fucking thing you've ever heard in your life, it's like still, oh my God, man.
It's like 28 seconds long.
The 3 guys are back together singing about fucking like getting their assholes fingered.
Right.
It's like the boys are so back right now. I'm tearing up a little bit when they say like proctologist or some shit. Like it's just crazy to me that like everything they do is so wrapped in the story behind this album. And I, honest to God, feel like bands would kill to have that level of like depth to the material they're writing this deep.
Yeah, it's a
so they didn't have to dig for something to like craft an album around.
Yeah, it's good silver lining for what is a scary situation, obviously, with Hopps's diagnosis and all that.
Right, like it's not like the type of thing you'd wish for, right?
No,
you don't want to be in a scary airplane accident. You don't want to face a cancer diagnosis. You don't want to battle aliens or fucking whatever.
But I love the idea that it's like every meme where it's like
Tom quietly survived an alien invasion and none of us know about it. You know what I mean? That was actually the impetus for all this.
It's like, oh yeah, you know, surviving cancer, surviving an airplane thing, and then it's like cut to he's like out in space, just fucking battling aliens,
right?
just surviving
soldiers
wars.
Dying all around him. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's got a twitch in his eye when he sings out. I was like, he seeds some shit.
But I think born from like those same tragedies is just a rejuvenation in their love for their own craft and all that. And what I mean by that is just like outside of the tracks that directly deal with those scary situations. You know, You Don't Know What You've Got is another example of that. It's tracks like Edging and of course like Turn This Off and
Turpentine's got a little bit of silliness to it.
Right. Like I also really appreciate that because it's clearly this band just sort of rediscovering that same fun.
Right. It's being able to put yourself in a headspace that you were in maybe 20 years ago. And like, I've seen so many bands fail. You know, we talked really negatively about the most recent album from The Used this year that just felt like it had none of the soul that I would hope to see from that band and nothing to replace it. Like no creative, like, interest or like experimental nature, like nothing that says like.
And it was especially jarring because that wasn't the case 2-3 years ago when they bounced back with Heartwork, yeah,
right,
where all of that was present, that soul, that heart, that mystery, that intrigue, all that stuff, that creativity.
And to be fair, that's kind of like what Nine felt like a little bit. If I remember correctly, neither of us were particularly fond of Nine, right?
Yeah.
Do you personally feel like Tom DeLonge makes a big difference to you versus Skiba?
I think so. I think it's even more so just Tom being present makes the other guys that much more engaged.
Like it raises everybody's talent level.
Yeah.
Like the talent pool just grows because
Like,
you've
right.
reinserted like a key piece.
I listen to this album and I'm like, man, those drums sound fucking fantastic. And I don't remember like that sticking out too much on the last record. And like, I don't remember Mark being so fucking stand out-ish on that record. And here I'm like, I really enjoy his parts. And obviously you do have Tom. And I think Tom is just such a strong character too, in a way that
vocally
Skiba just
too
isn't either.
Like not just like their presence as like a frontman, but just like their voice has so much character to it, right?
Yeah.
Which I mean at this point ironically has become a meme in some senses, but it's undeniable like hearing how well suited he is for this project. And it's like this for me, I think it was last week we got a question that was like something along the lines of when a member like leaves a band or when members leave the band, like if it's still the same, you know, like if it still feels the same. And I can't remember exactly what the context was, but this is like a really great case study of how like one single piece can leave and the entire chemistry just somehow fucking dissipates. Yeah. Right. And that's not the case with every band. We listen to a lot of projects that have like tons of rotating pieces, right? And oftentimes it's the entire face and voice of the band, and it'll get swapped out for somebody else, and we'll be like, yeah, no, I still like them, or maybe, hey, I like them a little better, right?
Key members where suddenly you were that much more invested in the project than you were before. Mm-hmm. It's insane.
But Blink-182, it's just like this. It feels almost impossible to replicate what the three of these individuals have together.
Yeah, and I guess what I'll tell you too is like I don't think it's all good. But for the most part, man, is some of it great.
I'm kind of with you there, right? It feels like in some senses, there's a little bit of fat on this record in a way that feels like, part of me almost wonders if Blink visualizes this as their final release, right? And maybe that almost comes to like the name convention and everything. And they're just almost like, here's everything, you know? It's almost like it's not worth cutting anything. Like, here are all the final songs that we wrote together as a band, you know? So maybe even if I'm not in love with something like Other Side, it's like not quite bad enough that the band would be like, let's cut it. It just sort of pales in comparisons to the better songs on this record, right?
I think my least favorite track on here was When We Were Young.
Really?
And as far as naming conventions go, feels very intentional considering they are headlining that this weekend.
It's explicit. It's explicit. Yeah.
Yeah. But just did not work for me at all. I just did not like the pacing in the chorus.
I think there's a couple songs on this record that like When We Were Young in Childhood, that they don't reach the emotional heights of One More Time. So they feel lesser than by comparison, you know? I think the most standout track to me outside of like singles is Blink Wave, which is like Blink-182 is like, for all intents and purposes, I feel like this is an Angels and Airwaves song, but it's almost presented as like Blink-182 doing like a synthwave rendition of themselves.
Right.
And everything about it really works. And I like that they almost like stamp it like in a way that's incredibly on the nose. You know what I mean?
It's also such a like clutch just genre name for like potential genre name one day. But
Or you're saying you want to see other bands run with Blink with?
real quick, just to go back, excuse me, to the naming convention here one more time. Potentially is their last record. I view it more as they're looking at it as it could be their last record, because insane shit like cancer diagnoses happen, plane crashes happen. You don't know. Like tomorrow's never guaranteed.
You forgot that.
Alien invasions, right? Just they're among us. And I view it more as like, hey, we're gonna give you all we got because we don't know if we'll be back. We're gonna try, but it's just not guaranteed, type thing.
Agree completely. I think it's like you can read as much into it as you want, right?
Yeah.
But there is
a sense of finality here.
Right, but and that sense of finality is another aspect that I feel like helps elevate this record, right? Because it gives it like it gives it a heavier weight, like it carries more weight. You know, I wrote some notes here. Nothing really like too specific. You know, we kind of acknowledged early on that, like, you know, there's a varied tone throughout the record that we feel like captures sort of like the entirety of this band's career. I like this sort of like dynamic in the stylistic choices that we sort of bounce from like the serious to the fun and silly back and forth, which I feel like this band has always kind of felt like they chose one or the other and stuck with it for the record. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that there's a lot of dopamine hits throughout this album, and it's just like driven a lot by nostalgia, driven a lot by the back and forth between like Tom and Mark, and just kind of like missing that like flavor and that feeling. It's obviously a very emotionally loaded record. You know, we discussed that. I think that overall, I kind of agree with you that it doesn't feel like a perfect record, but it does feel like a very, very good Blink-182 record. Like certainly my favorite since they're self-titled, and yours since 9, of course.
1 for 2, baby.
But there's been a lot of noise in between then, right? Like I remember the last, I think Neighborhoods was the last album with Tom, and it felt like such a wash. Like it should have been this, but it wasn't. It just felt like a had to, like it felt perfunctory. You know what I mean?
How did you feel about? Because I think Tom was still on the project. The Dog Eat Dog EP that came after.
That didn't click for me either. And in a sense, maybe it's like maybe I don't pick up on those records in particular, but maybe there's a little Dog Eat Dog here. Maybe there's a little Neighborhoods here. You know what I mean? I don't know that I feel 9 at any point in this record. I think the one thing I think this band could have done, which would have been cute, and I don't know, I guess the band ultimately, whether they ever considered it or not, if they did, chose not to, but could you have brought in Matt Skiba on like a track?
As much as I dislike 9, bro, I can't help but pour out the longest pour out for our fallen soldier here.
And for what it's worth, we'll talk about Alkaline Trio later this episode in the news.
Matt Skiba's fine, but like, man, it did feel like the guy came in and pretty much did the band a favor for a good amount of years.
I think you're going
they
slightly
did him a favor
a
as
little
well.
far.
They did him a pretty big favor, but like
you maybe got that flipped.
It would have been nice to be like on an end of a track, be like, and shout out Matt. Like,
yeah, it's not like they brought in a touring vocalist. They brought in a third element to this project, right?
Who did deliver like a couple of decent Blink songs over the course of 2 albums. Not 2 good albums, but a couple of good songs.
Right. So overall, I'd probably give this like,
I'm gonna light 4.
I think I'll give it weirdly, you almost feel higher than me on this one.
Really? I mean, I really did enjoy this record.
I'm comfortable with a light 4. It's just like I think in the grand scheme of the albums I've listened to this year, I don't
Does this
know,
match up with the other 4s?
right, that this is one of the like best ones I've heard this year. I don't even know if this is the best album I heard this week, but
Oh, it's not.
in the grand scope of BLINK-182, this feels like a 4.5 to me. You know what I mean? So I guess I'll say we're kind of aligned there from like different perspectives, I suppose.
Interesting.
Marcus, we also checked out
152 by Taking Back Sunday. This is the Long Island Outfit's 8th studio album, arriving the 27th of October via Fantasy Records.
We talked until the sun came up. It meant so much we don't remember what. You better save yourself before you try and save somebody else.
152 consists of 10 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2016's Tidal Wave LP. And if I had to tell you what my two worst like album listening experiences were over the last number of years,
Stop.
9 by Blink-182 is up there, and Tidal Wave by Taking Back Sunday was one of the hardest listens I've ever sat through.
Hardest in the capacity that you thoroughly were just not enjoying yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's a pretty fair statement to make here. So, and I guess the reason I preface this review with that is to tell you where I left off with Taking Back Sunday. Like, I did not have the fondness in my heart that I once had for the band.
Right. It really felt like Tidal Wave snuffed it out completely. Right. Like there was a little bit of excitement for me personally when the individual like guys returned, right? Like John and Sean, who at the time had gone on to do Stray Light Run, later rejoined the band, right? And I think the first record they put out was the self-titled. And that had like it wasn't great, but it had like it had a couple tracks that got me really excited. Like it had Flicker Flicker Fade, which like man, I remember it was like 3 or 4 years ago. I was in Urban Outfitters or something, and that came on, and I was like,
that's still on the Urban
hard.
Outfitters rotation?
It was like whatever. It was like a few years ago, and it was like random. Like maybe it was like a PacSun or something, right, or whatever. But it was like it came on randomly. It was like one of these songs. I was like I forgot, but the second I heard it, I was like, oh my god! It was immediate. It was like I had to tell the cashier it was underrated. You know what I mean? They're like hurrying up to get me out of the store.
And after that, you get Happiness Is.
Right, and that was probably the start of me kind of losing my enthusiasm, right?
So I think I lost my enthusiasm with that self-titled record.
Yeah, but this is another case with like Blink-182 where, correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't maybe have the same fondness for Taking Back Sunday I do, where I go back to
right
like
at all.
First like couple albums I was like so in.
So Marcos Lore, favorite Taking Back Sunday record, I should tell you, is Louder Now. And what I think it actually is New Again.
I'm with you there, though. I am
really
not necessarily my favorite. I mean to say that I think New Again is very good. When I think the general consensus is that most people don't like it.
Right. I saw like new members are returning. We're dropping the other guys, and I was like, "Fuck! I fucking love that record."
Those other guys seem good.
I was pissed. Yeah.
Oh man, talk about another weird example like similar to Blink-182. I just remember the guy who joined for that New Again album. Like the other band broke up. You know what I mean?
Right.
He goes on to join Taking Back Sunday, and one album later
was that
God,
Matt?
That sounds so incredibly correct. And it was Frank before that, right?
Frank was there for 2 records.
Right. Who Frank White I fucking adored.
Yeah.
I loved. I thought the vocal dynamic between him and Adam
was it Frank or Fred?
Fred. Yes,
Fred,
thank you. Fred.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you corrected it before we went on the whole episode. I kept saying that. Yeah, but anyways, going all back to that. So it's like I'm so cold on this band. Having not heard any of the singles leading up to this, just coming off of Tidal Wave, it's like, for starters, I can't believe that was fucking 7 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's also like this band was dormant for a good while without, COVID baking some of that time in.
Right. It was like dormant that went into overtime the second the pandemic hit, right? But like then I get like the first single for this and I'm like, all right. I mean, it is a popular band in this scene, so I'm going to check it out, right? And I was like completely wowed. Like I was like, where the fuck has this band been? Like there's we got a little bit of dual vocals in here. Adam feels like finally untethered from this weird fucking Bruce Springsteen thing he was doing on the last album. It's like, holy shit, is this band kind of back? And I'm like, I'm level setting myself a little bit. I'm like, don't go crazy.
But then you get single number 2.
Right.
And like suddenly my curiosity and interest is spiking.
And that was Sold. And it correlated with the band doing this sort of like fun one-off thing where they played in like a backyard in like their hometown. And it was just like everything about this band and their energy and everything. It was just like everything was like lighting up. Everything just felt good again. And then I don't think I actually listened to Amphetamine Smiles until the album came out. So like I was going into this with just the 2 singles and they were perfect to me. And I was looking at the track listing and I'm like, all right, so we start with 3 singles, which I thought was interesting. And this comes out the 27th. So, it's possible the band drops another one like day and date. Happens a lot.
To be fair, that's every record nowadays.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I'm talking about my experience with this record, but maybe by the time people heard it, there could be a 4th single. I'm just saying.
All I mean is like, man, records just start with singles. Not like Beartooth is a great example where suddenly like first 5 tracks on that one was all singles for the most part, besides like one.
Okay. So fair point, right? But it's essentially like the rest of this album's a complete mystery to me. It's like I'm gonna hear these 3 singles and
I get the point you're making.
Right.
Yeah.
What could this experience be like moving forward? And the first time I listened to it, the album in its entirety, I was like a little underwhelmed. I think there is a magic to, at the very least, Sold in the one. Amphetamine Smiles I'm a little more lukewarm on, but like those first 2 singles, there is such a magic to them that I don't think is ever quite captured in the entirety of the album that follows it, right?
Specifically Sold.
Yeah, and it's like what it is, it's that like it's like it's a certain, it's an energy, like it's a tempo, it's a style, it's everything the band is doing is just like perfectly aligned, and it all sort of reminds me of a Taking Back Sunday that I was really fond of, right? And specifically a frontman I was really fond of for a very long time.
Yeah.
And it felt like they came alive with those 2 songs. And the irony is that I think the rest of this album is low-key just a better version of the album that I really disliked before it.
Right, in a way, suddenly that one just looks like growing pains.
100%. And the first time I listened to this album, it felt like I had the rug pulled out from under me and it was annoying. And then I went back and I listened to it again and I just sort of kind of found myself, now that I know what to it, like now that my expectations were a little more level set, I found things to enjoy in the remainder of those tracks. Like I ended up finding songs that I really liked, like Lightbringer and New Music Friday. And even though the tempo changes sort of felt dramatic to me initially, now I sort of like, I was appreciating like kind of the heart the album had, the kind of like overall very somber mood that it finds in the, 2/3 of the back half of this album.
Yeah, I don't know. There just seems to be like a, it's hard to explain it. I don't know. The band just seems so sincere on this record.
Yeah,
in a way that it felt so forced on Tidal Wave. Here it feels so sincere in like direct comparison to that record.
Does it feel like a little bit Taking Back Sunday is micro-dosing what Blink-182 did on their album? And like when you hear tracks like him, like there are moments and like verses in this that feel like they really call to like the group of friends that compose this band.
152.
Well, I mean, that feels like. Wait, what are you trying to say?
I think this is very much playing into like you being a fan of this band. You take the 152 that has been featured on all of the album art over the years. Like, I think, and granted, like, you may not have noticed, right? Like, you know, you don't notice on Ladder now that like the ticket admission is $1.52, right? You know that now, but like, essentially what I'm trying to say is like, I think the band is like saying, this one's for the fans, you know, like While She Sleeps, like this is the sixth. You know?
I think you make a really good point, but that's not what I was trying to say. I was more so talking about sort of like the brotherly relationship between the four individuals who compose this band currently. Right?
I like that.
In a similar way that Blink-182 was like, hey, it's us three, like, you know, from friends to strangers to friends again type thing.
Yeah, I
this
thought you were
feels like
taking
a
it more
significantly more low key version of kind of that, you know?
I thought you meant more like just the nostalgic sound.
I think your point is still valid. I just think they're separate points.
Got it.
So I agree with you in that sense too, is that like there are aspects of this that are a little bit like, hey, you know, the Taking Back Sunday family, like bring it all in, you know what I mean? And so it branches out. Like initially it's like the band, but then it's like, hey, it's the fandom. And that sort of speaks to them going and playing that hometown show in a backyard again. You know what I mean? So I think there is a sort of depth here. I think there are some cute things this band does sometimes where I think they do like little tip of the hats to other lyrics from different bands. Like there's it's not so specific. I don't know if I caught any of that. So it's like in there's a line in this album that's like I think it's in the track Quit Trying, where they go, say my name, which is like just a line, sure, but it's also like a massive hook on a Destiny Child song. And so it's impossible for me not to pull that.
Well, you caught that with Blink too, right?
Which was what? Specifically the Destiny Child call out?
Hit me, baby, one more time.
Did they actually say that? Because that would like piss me off.
Just
if
the
it
album
went over
title,
my head,
Sam.
right? It would really bother me if it went over my head, though. And I feel like they do it like a little bit like up top with Amphetamine Smiles. I think there's another line, like there's like little bits and pieces that I'm guessing at if they're trying something here, but I'm never like quite certain. Like I said, the vast majority of this album has a real somber mood to it, but I think like something like New Music Friday has like this really perfect splash of like sadness to it, where it's like, okay, man, Taking Back Sunday are one of the emo goats, right? So it's like when they're in their bag, it's hard to argue against them. You know what I mean? 100%. Like when they're on their shit, they're on their fucking shit.
And you know, surprisingly so. And I'm happy to report like they are in their bag multiple times in this record.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to jump too far ahead.
It's not old Taking Back Sunday, but it's good Taking Back Sunday.
It feels like a bit like a lot of this just makes sense for like Taking Back Sunday and where they're at in their careers and a lot of different stuff, you know. And it's impossible not to compare this to Blink-182, because I feel like in a weird way these bands are like similarly aligned in the fact that like they're long-standing like acts in this alternative space, right?
They've had nearly as many albums as each other.
Right. They're both bands deep in their career, though, you know, you could argue maybe Blink-182 could have been influenced by, or Taking Back Sunday could have been influenced by Blink-182 based on, you know, when they started. And
what I was going to say is like also two bands that truly did have something to prove.
Yeah, right. And bands that hold very fond memories and a fond space like inside my heart.
Right. And I guess what I mean by that too is like, I think that sentiment around Tidal Wave was shared by many people and not just you and I.
Okay.
I think Tidal Wave was a disappointment for a lot of people. And obviously Blink-182 coming off of a couple of whack records, you knew like Trio back newly in place, like just had something to prove, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Overall,
I'm going to firm 3.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's just like, this is an album, it's like I enjoy it. I don't think it's one of the best Taking Back Sunday albums, but it's certainly better than the last couple. It's I would say it's a significant improvement from the last couple.
Yeah, I think this one falls under return to form, right?
Return to form-ish.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever quite reaches the heights of the first few albums we got from this band, which I think are nearly perfect.
Return to form before Tidal Wave.
Yes,
Just like, because like where we left off there was like fine.
I'd go further. I think Happiness is also felt like a wash to me. And neither.
I don't think I ever
album,
listened to that record in full.
And you didn't quite miss out on anything, like, respectfully. It's just like the band has been able to capture something here that is very extremely reminiscent of the fondness I had for this band early on. And I don't think it is a knock it out of the park home run success, but I do think overall it's an enjoyable record. Just maybe not one of the standouts of the year when I start to look outside of just this band's discography.
Yeah, more than fair.
Marcos, we also listen to...
We're 3 in. We also listened to Mundane Magic by A Story Told.
I'm not gonna close the door on you, 'cause I'm still holding on to what I knew. Time was up and I couldn't keep her. I should have believed her, but I'm not gonna close the door on you.
This is the West Virginia Outfit's 4th studio album, self-released on the 20th of October. Mundane Magic consists of 12 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to 2021's American Made LP.
American Made LP was one of my favorite albums of that year. It made me fall head over heels in love with this band, and it's still one of my favorite records to fall back on and just like let play in the background. You know what I mean?
Few records you own on vinyl.
Yeah,
even though your collection is growing.
Had I been smart enough, I might have taken the opportunity today to pull it out and put it on display here.
Right.
But rarely, if ever, am I thinking ahead. So my anticipation for this record was high. Like, I was excited for this one. What was your energy coming into this?
I think you've always been the bigger A Story Told fan. I've certainly always enjoyed this band, but I've never had the same just appreciation that you clearly do for them. I've liked them, but I've never loved them. And I think I'm getting real close to loving them, especially with this brand new record. I think where I want to start is just, it is rare that you listen to a band whose sound feels so fully realized.
It does feel like A Story Told, though, exactly who they are and who they want to be, right?
Yeah. Like, I feel like I finished this record and I'm like, I can easily convince myself this is exactly the record that they set out to write. And it's like every single note they played, every single chord, whatever, was exactly what they pictured in their head. And they managed to perfectly just translate that into a record, and
they realize the vision,
right? And you can rarely say that about records, much less bands in general. Like, I feel like A Story Told just know who they are, and so many bands we listen to are like, oh, I can kind of see what they want to be, and it's gonna take 3 albums to get exactly there. But like A Story Told, I listen to this and I'm like, man, I don't even know what this band would want to do after this. This just sounds like the perfect version of this band.
You know, and I think you're sort of touching on something that's sort of adjacent to that, which is the consistency throughout this record, where it really, it's almost like, for better or worse, this album doesn't have like peaks or valleys. It has like a real like flat consistency overall, where it's just like, from start to finish, all 12 tracks, all just sort of equally enjoyable.
Yeah. And it makes for a hell of a ride, though. Like, you talk about like peaks, like, sure, it's great to have a song that stands out head and shoulders above other tracks, but with that, you typically get the track that certainly pulls the rest of the tracks down with it. This one doesn't have that. And it might not have that big standout track, but like it makes for such a smooth ride in comparison.
Right. It's just something about, it's like they've really nailed like this album listening experience where it just feels like for 40 minutes or however long, you are just in deep with a story told, right? Like you're just in their universe, you're in their corner. This is their style. They've got it nailed down.
What is their style for people who aren't super familiar?
You know what it, and I've said it multiple times before when talking about this band, I just really have always considered them alternative music's Taylor Swift. And it's very specific to just like this overall feeling that they capture with this music, that they have this really wholesome aura that like permeates all of their songs and their albums. And it's also this like this sense of realism and time and place and specificity to like their geographical location. Even though I can't nail it down, it's just like everything about this band feels like this small town,
homegrown,
sweet pop kind of like vibe, right?
And I think it definitely has that like country twist to it at times.
Well, I was also going to say, like, credit to Taylor Swift, who's an incredibly varied artist at this point, who has like...
I'll make sure to check her out.
Yeah. I feel like A Story Told captures a very particular era of Taylor Swift, right? But they capture it so perfectly. And there's like it's like I find myself extremely comforted by this band. Like this is cozy. Like
part of it is like you mentioned cozy, and it's also because it has a bit of like it's got like a dash of like 90s Full House type of like, you know what I mean? Like I can see like some of this music being played during the outro of like a 90s sitcom.
It all circles back to wholesome. Everything about this band just feels like it's just like a warm blanket. You know what I mean?
It's also like fairly contemporary at times too. Honestly, A Story Told sound like what Grayscale sometimes thinks they sound like. In their head, I guess.
No, but I understand exactly what you're saying. There are these bands that like you lump them into like, say, the pop punk corner of the scene, right? Because that's just like stylistically the easiest way to label them. But the reality is that they just kind of feel like more of a pop band that exists in the alternative space.
100% the case here.
Yeah, right. Where it's like A Story Told, you sit here and listen and it's like, I could see any one of these songs being picked up and taking off, right? And in a sense that there's sort of like a easy listening aspect to a lot of what they do. There's a very much a pop ear that they lend to each of their individual tracks, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, a contemporary nature to a lot of the things that they do. I think in one instance where I feel like the band kind of changes it up a little bit is in Choked Up, where they kind of bring in these electronic elements that I really enjoyed. That for me felt like the standout track in terms of just kind of doing something a little different than everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this is one of those rare bands where I'm so comfortable with them not dramatically changing the formula in any way from song to song.
Right. And I think like part of it is like it's in the nature of the name too. It's like this is like you sort of explain some of this stuff and it's like it sounds like could be anyone, but then you listen to A Story Told play these songs and it does turn out to be fucking magic.
There have always been these bands in the scene that like I felt strongly that they could put out anything, and as long as it's like them, it almost like their floor is really high. Like their most middling song is still good because it's them, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like even if it doesn't have the strongest hook, it's still really enjoyable.
Absolutely.
so like I honestly feel like you could throw a dart and hit a song that I think most people would find a level of enjoyment from this band. I think it makes a story told really easy to recommend, right? Because I think go check out whatever 3 songs are at the top of their Spotify and you'll know immediately if the entirety of this band's discography aligns with your tastes.
Yeah.
Now, all of that being said, I will say that this wasn't the spiritual experience that I had when I first heard American Made.
Okay.
Which is an album that for me is like cemented as one of my favorites of all time. It's similar to like the experience I had listening to the new album from Nothing But Thieves this year, right? Where I think back to Moral Panic, and that album, when I heard it, was life-changing.
As good as it gets, yeah.
And then following it up, I think, is its own different conversation. You know what I mean? It's like, I really enjoy this album, but I didn't quite have the same connection I did to when I first heard American Made, right? And that factors into like my overall like review score. So this sits at like a 3.5 for me as a really enjoyable experience from a band that I've found now is really dependable for me and will be an easy album to go back to this year and listen to when I'm just looking for something that, like I said, never really falters in my enjoyment. But it didn't, I would be lying if I say it didn't wow me like the first time I heard like American Made.
So I kind of feel like Sam in 2021 right now.
Wow, interesting.
I'm not saying it's like a complete spiritual awakening, but I think that it feels like one of the farthest, like we've landed far on a couple of albums over the course of a year, but it's generally albums that you and I have differing opinions on.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're both pretty high on this one, which why for me, I think it's like a 4.5 out of 5.
Wow. So this is just one of those cases that actually kind of makes me happy that you're like dramatically like
I think this is more so like Marcus is just finally catching up type thing.
Like the light went off with this one. Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really love
Or
Mundane
went
Magic.
on.
Go check it out. It is out now, of course. And metalcore fans rejoice. We got one for y'all this week. We got one this week for y'all. Shame on Me by Catch Your Breath. This is the Austin, Texas outfit's debut studio album, released the 20th of October via Thriller Records. Shame on Me consists of 13 tracks and is the follow-up to a whole load of standalone singles dating all the way back to 2018. And granted, like at some point we started getting the singles for this. Shame on Me, the title track being like the first official single off this one, dropping back in like, I want to say like 2021-ish, maybe 2022, but like early.
You know what's funny is
This has been a long time coming is ultimately what I'm trying to say.
you can almost say this about every debut record, but this is like a career compilation to date.
Kind of.
You know, but like to be fair, you could like any band who like maybe doesn't release 2 EPs leading up to an album, you could kind of say like, hey, they had the entirety of the songs they've written in their life to choose from.
In all fairness, I do think that like not all debuts are made the same. And what I mean by that is like, you're right. Like there could be a band where for whatever reason, we're going to be reviewing one soon, fucking Wargasm UK, fucking 15 EPs. And finally the debut album.
Right.
Or, and there's definitely like 2 or 3 examples of that this year. Debut album, you've heard nothing prior type thing. Like,
right, which is
we're just out the
example.
gate. No, this is not that. This is sort of in the middle of all those things. We're like, Catch Your Breath has been around for a minute.
Did they have an EP before
They didn't.
this?
They didn't.
Okay,
But, like, we've had
okay. Yeah,
singles.
okay.
We've
We're on the
had-
same page.
They've been around.
We're on the same page. Yep.
Anyway, let's talk about Shame on Me.
All right, I'm not going to lie. You and I were essentially looking down the barrel of like 20 albums to review this week, and we made some difficult cuts.
We made some fucking major cuts.
In a way that it's like after we record tomorrow, I will then just be diving into a bunch of other albums that I was looking forward to releasing. But I've had this one marked on the calendar, which just is like, Catch Your Breath has been one of these bands who I've just been really excited about this year.
And it's strange too, because like, I don't know why, but like, yes, there's a buzz around this band, and I don't know if it's all over the place, but at least for you and I, like, I've just been eager to hear this one.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there are aspects of this band which align so specifically to the tastes of this podcast that it's like there feels as if there is a slight inevitability to how we would overall end up feeling, at the very least, going into this record. But for me, it came from two big things. It came from, so Dial Tone was technically, I think, a single that was released late last year, but somehow I completely missed it. And
the world didn't.
Well, I think I and the world sort of found this song maybe a little later.
Okay.
And I think earlier this year, it really exploded. And I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, but you say this has like 35 million streams on Spotify?
It's doing pretty good.
We're talking about a band who just released their debut album. So that's like, bands pray to have that level of streams on a song at any point in like 20 years of their career, right? Catch Your Breath coming out of the gate hot.
Right. Coming. This is a victory lap for them, this full album. And it's their debut.
So like Dial Tone was like, hey, I'm with everybody, but we are aligned. This shit hits. And then I heard 21 Gun Salute, and that's where I really got sold. I was like, yeah, no. Now we're talking bare minimum 2 songs that I think are fucking perfect, right? Yeah. And then like the trickle from there has been like, man, I heard Mirror, and I'm like, all right, yeah, okay. Like I'm feeling fucking good about this shit.
Recent one, YSKW, Why Should You Know? Or why... You should know why.
You should know why. Yes.
Had it in reverse.
It's right. So it's like coming into this album, I'm like, all right, like singles are absolutely, we're crushing it. So it's like on the low end, this album will be decent because it houses some really good songs, even if it just ends up throwing a bunch of filler in between. Oh, but I'm happy to say that's not the case. This band fucking killed it.
We have little to no filler. But I will tell you, one of my few critiques of this record, I don't think we start off on the strongest foot.
I agree. I feel like we start off on a foot that feels random.
Those two
this album
first
feels
tracks,
like it needs an introduction before we get right into a song.
And I know exactly which one it is. But what I want to tell you is like No Evil, Die on the Inside, just... I don't know, like it starts it off on the wrong foot because those are just kind of the 2 most boring tracks on this record. And honestly, I could definitely see an argument for this being a lean 11 and not the 13 tracks that it is.
Sure.
By cutting those 2 tracks. I think what this record should have opened on...
I think you do No Evil extremely dirty in that I kind of feel you on track list placement, but not in overall song. I think that track's a blast.
Whatever. My Confession should have been the lead, like the leading song on this record, not the lead single. Like it should have been the opening track. It's just a very dynamic version of this band. It's a very like layered song, even like lyrically as well. And I think it's just very moody, and it just sets the stage for what I think this album could have, like, that's the full potential. It's just reworking this track listing a little bit. But where you do land is a record that's just full of fucking banger after banger after banger. And by the time it's done, you kind of just realize that, I guess the reason you like it so much is because this band is, and I mean this as a full compliment, in the way that it wouldn't have come across in like 2018 when this is becoming a thing, and I'll get to it. This is like the purest strain of octane core out there right now.
Agree completely. And it's like, you're right. There was a time and place.
I would turn my nose at that.
And still are many instances
there are
where octane core is followed by derogatory. And I think a little bit of that has shifted. I think the biggest shift for me is that
say it. Say their name.
The faces of octane, your Wage Wars and Bad Omens and I Prevails and Motionless in Whites have had a really significant influence on the other bands coming up underneath them. And you see these bands taking that influence, whether it's working with similar producers or
working with writers in those same projects. You look at Wage War,
right?
And how that one singer's hands are in pretty much everything in the scene at the moment.
Exactly. The right specific producers,
Cody.
like it's certain like stylistic choices, right?
So right, like you have those bands sort of like trailblaze this new version of Octane Core.
Right, so
And
Octane
now-
Core is almost like slightly elevated itself
It
by
has.
virtue of the artists that have become the face of it, right? So we've stepped away from like, more often than not seeing bands like, all right, I'm not going to name names, but seeing bands who my tastes do not align with.
I know that you and I both had the same band pop into
Got the
mind first,
same band in
and that
my
album
mind.
fucking sucked this year.
But I don't need to dog on a
I
band
know.
for no reason, so go ahead.
Well, but like you're saying, like you've laid the foundation, and now you have some fucking talent.
Right, so it's like we're in this
Coming out of the-
real fucking sweet spot.
Catch Your Breath, Until I Wake, Archetypes Collide. Like you've got some serious fucking heat.
Dark
coming.
Divine shares a label with this band.
And also like for what it's worth, this band sounds really similar to The Word Alive, who they also share a label with.
There's
Or rather, their vocalist sounds really close to Telly at times.
there's a weird Thriller umbrella that I think seems to like capture a lot of these bands, and I'm not sure what the shared trait is other than the label.
But you're finally starting to realize there is one, even
Right.
though that record label has seemed so so random for a little while. Because now you think of like other bands like Outlining Colors on there now, right?
Right.
Even like Rain City Drive at times definitely shares similarities.
And you wonder if there's something in there that's like a shared producer that we just like did a little research
Over
we'd
our
be able
head,
to
yeah.
pull it. You know what I mean? So like I was just kind of writing down like some random thoughts about this record, and I was like, all right, this for starter, this was like the easiest listening experience of my life. Like
this goes
there's
down real easy.
no level of this record is complicated. It is fun sing-along mallcore. All right. And it's like and I don't want you to you may take it as a negative. This might not be what you're looking for, but I think, like I said, we have found a real sweet spot currently, and we're seeing like some bands just like put out some really clean records that, similarly to like an Archetypes Collide or Until I Wake, they may lack a little personality that I would prefer to see in my band, and a little more experimentation and a little more work to set themselves apart. But for what they're doing with like these debut-ish records, in this band's instance, very much their debut, is they're just coming out of the gate with a real clean first like experience with the project, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of room to grow, but there's not a ton of flaws.
It's like when you watch footage of like a really good high school prospect, and like all the kids who like came up playing that sport beforehand looked nothing like the beast that these kids are now, where they're coming in and they're like tall, fucking muscular, like they've been training since they were 2. Like that's what these bands feel like nowadays. It's just like, man, artists did not come out firing out of the gates like Catch Your Breath does now. in the
Junior
past.
varsity playing at a senior level.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
understand what
mean.
you're saying. I'm going to give you another point of comparison. It's kind of like waves you'll see in like films, right? Where it's like you'll see your first A24 horror movie and you'll be like, this is fucking game changing. And then there's like this sweet spot for like a year where you get like 5 other movies from like maybe different like distributors or whatever, and it's like they're all doing this like horror as an exercise in like a completely different metaphor, and every single one just hits because it's like it's fresh and
Yes.
everybody's like finding this vibe, and it feels new, and it's like there's a space 3 years later where the magic isn't quite there. But right now, I think we sort of like are in this magic and it all just is kind of working for me. Right. And it's like, again, I do want to see these individuals go out and find their own voice, but I'm not enjoying myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and I think that is probably the biggest takeaway as far as what I would like to see on the next record. I kind of want to know who's in this band and like who they are
and what they have to say, and like a lot of that stuff. Like right now, it feels like a band is very much molded entirely around the most popular styles and sounds of the current metalcore scene, like we said, right? And
they're good students of the game. They're fucking good.
Right, but it's like it's almost like you keep having this like internal battle with yourself. And I remember having the same exact feeling when we were with that Archetypes Collide record, where it's like I finished it and I'm like, man, there's not really a song on here I didn't enjoy. So it's like I'm coming at it from that angle. But then my alternative angle is like, but it's also not the revelation of hearing a project who's out there doing something that really like distinguishes themselves from everybody else, right?
Is it too safe? Type thing.
Right. But I can easily say that like this is one of the like it's just an easy recommend. It's such an easy recommend, y'all. It's so easy to just put this album on and enjoy yourself. Like
I think right now I sit at a 4 on this guy.
Okay,
it's a light 4.
I might go like okay, so I might go like a hard 5, right? But it's like I do want to credit this band with. I don't necessarily think this is easy, right? You know what I mean? Like I don't want to say that just going in there and writing a song that has stylistic similarities to bands like Bad Omens or I Prevail or The Word Alive, for example, and what they're doing. I don't think that's easy. I think you have to be really fucking good to write songs like this that really stand out and grab me, right? And have me excited to hear this album.
Listen, if every band could write choruses this fucking good, they would be doing that.
Right, like not everybody's that good at capturing an atmosphere like the band does here, right? Not everybody can write a fucking melody that's as strong as the one we get in like 21 Gun Salute. Or I mean, again, like the fucking Dial Tone song, like not for nothing, it is probably their best fucking song. Right, 100%, right? And
regardless of how popular it's gotten, you know?
And it says something that like the other songs on this record like can hold the fucking like candle to that like record. You know, and there are little bits and pieces in here that jump out to me. Like I think Deadly has this like real like tight, simple like lyrical gem built into it. There's cleverness there, right? So I think this band is doing a lot of things right. I think they have massive potential, and I think they've come out of the gate ahead of the pack in a way that we've seen a few other bands do recently, but also in a way that I've seen a lot of other bands be incapable of capturing, right? You know, I think a lot of bands are chasing this specific, like, treasure chest of potential right now. And the numbers don't lie when it comes to Catch Your Breath in particular, right? Like Dial Tone is not an accidental hit. It is a genuine, bona fide, fucking incredibly well written, like absolutely massive metalcore song. And I tip my hat to that band, and I'm really excited to see where they go moving forward.
Yeah, I think if this review is not indicative of the fact that we'll probably be talking about this band for years to come, then I'll like come out and say that like, man, I'm really excited about the future of this band. Yeah. I cannot wait to see what else they have in store for us.
Like this is the new breed, and there's so much potential here.
Yes, sir.
Marcus, one last album this week.
One last record this week, last but not least. Losing What We Love by Knuckle Puck.
Trapped up in a trance, got me spinning and regretting like, damn, I really fell for that. Thought you could load me up, but now I'm firing back. You did it all for clout, but never did expect for this to
This is the Chicago Outfit's fourth studio album, released the 20th of October via Pure Noise Records. Losing What We Love consists of 11 tracks and is the much anticipated follow-up to last year's Disposable Life EP. And before that, just because I want to say it out loud.
Say it out loud.
2020's 2020.
Which wasn't the only 2020 we got that year, if I remember correctly.
There was probably, at least in our own scene, there was probably one more. And then
Muir's
greater...
hindsight is 2020,
yes.
which I guess I sort of like mentally have tied the two together.
And then I'm willing to bet 5 country artists, 20 pop stars,
certainly
10 rappers certainly. Also.
Let's not get hung up on it. I agree with you. All right, so it was probably like 3-4 weeks ago at this point where you and I heard The Tower, and we had this moment where we were like, is Knucklepuck better than we thought they were? Like, it was this really weird moment where Knucklepuck was always one of these bands that you and I like enjoyed, right? But maybe weren't head over heels for the way we are, say, the bands in a similar space like State Champs or Neck Deep, right?
Movements, maybe.
Right. They're one of these bands who were sort of on the peripheral for us. It was like, they drop new shit, we're going to check it out, and we'll probably like it, but it's not going to blow our mind. And then The Tower came out, and it was like I started feeling a little bit different about this band, and I was like, "Hold on!" I walked away from this album with that same feeling, where I thought to myself, "Is Knucklepuck underrated?" Like, they're certainly a well-known name, but I sort of left this record, and I was like, "Do they get enough credit?"
I'm pretty much right there with you. I think of Knucklepuck and I'm like, why is my timeline not filled with people talking about this record right now? It's probably because I'm not following the right people. Because right. I think all the people that have been tuned into Knucklepuck are probably going to be pretty satisfied with this one. And you and I are just picking up where everyone else has left off. And yeah, this album's pretty fucking good. And the one exception to all that praise I will tell you is I don't remember that EP clicking for me much at all.
I don't remember
last year
either, right? But
I know we reviewed it on this show.
Right, but that's maybe why this album stands out even more, right? Because none of the pieces have changed. Nothing here is different. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, here's Knucklepuck, and they're back at it, but it just feels a little tighter. It just feels a little better than I remember any of their 100%. Other material sounding. I just think this record is like, it's really punchy, but there's like this underlying sadness at every fucking turn, and it's like, that's obviously the template for a lot of fucking pop punk bands, but it just feels like Knucklepuck finesse it a little bit better here than a lot of other bands.
There's also like a bit of a controlled chaos. Like, this band will really like erupt at times and just like wrap it up in a matter of 10 seconds.
Act accordingly.
That was exactly what I was thinking of.
For a pop punk song, rips.
Blurs those lines.
Absolutely fucking rips, right? And it was like, I remember when you and I were first like watching that video for The Tower, and there was this moment where it felt like Knucklepuck was slowing things down, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Are we dropping a breakdown in this song for some reason? And I'm like, I'm getting all excited.
That's the type of song where I finished and I was just like, why the fuck is this record not just called Act Accordingly?
Yeah, because the song, you're right. It is
good.
It is certainly, I agree with you. It is a absolute fucking standout on here. But that being said, like, I really like sort of the down tempo twist we get in Losing What We Love, which I think plays very well into the theme of not just the track itself, but sort of maybe the album in its entirety, right?
Yeah. And the stuff kind of in the middle of that is also extremely good too. October. Man, I love when bands manage to release something in like the same time frame as what they're talking about.
Right, premeditated.
That slide into October line in the course of that song not only, but like especially hits because I'm listening to that song in October because the album just dropped.
Right, and credit for the band that they managed to capture the feeling of a season in a song, right?
Yeah.
It's such a neat thing. Marcus, I'm gonna propose something that maybe will have me laughed out of the room, but it crossed my mind listening to this record. Is there any individual in this world that feels things as deeply and emotionally as the member of a pop punk band.
Obviously not, Sam.
Are they the Shakespeares of our generation? Because I sit here and I listen to Knuckle Puck and I think of other bands like Movements, for example, or Neck Deep, and how much the way that they verbalize emotion connects so deeply with me, and like how elegantly these bands have learned to script their emotions in a song. And like I'm thinking back to like the title track and the line in there, slowly we unravel, the only constant is the pain. And it's like,
the only constant is the pain.
Like this is poetic. Like this is not the presentation that this is not what you expect to get to the presentation of five guys in flannel shirts with their hats turned backwards, jumping up and down, playing instruments. You know what I mean? It's like the second you dig in, I was like, underrated geniuses, the entirety of the pop punk community, as far as I'm concerned. And like Knuckle Puck, a shining beacon amongst them for like communicating their emotions in a way that I think just like speaks to me, right?
Really moved by this record, are we?
It's not like the experience I had with that like Hot Mulligan record earlier this year, which for me is like,
you and Jimmy Butler, I know you both fucking felt that one.
It's honest to God an all-time classic as far as I'm concerned, right? With the year not being finished or whatever, like I could already look back on that record and be like, that moved me listening to that album,
but
right?
like in all fairness, as far as throwing your hat in for consideration, Grammy consideration for best fucking pop punk album of the year, like Knuckle Puck are right in that fucking fight. I think this is up there with all of those ones that I loved. What you mentioned, Hot Mulligan, fucking Movements is up there for me, you know, and this is right there with all those
Movements
records.
is very strong. I don't disagree with you. And I think like just one final note, like I think Fool is just another great example of like just a track that is so elegantly worded, like from start to finish. And like, it's just like, this album just made me, you know what this album made me do? It just made me appreciate this band. It made me appreciate a band that I felt like I just kind of took for granted for a very long time. And I finally listened to this record and I was like, oh man, I'm glad we have fucking Knuckle Puck.
One closing thought for me too. Groundhog Day was a single off of this, but I didn't really appreciate it until I heard it on this record. So fucking catchy. All of this record is super solid. I'm at a 4.5 on this one.
I'm at a 4. I'm gonna come a little bit under you. But
Why am I
really
so high this
enjoyed
week,
it.
Conja? Well, you gave Catch Your
you-
Breath a 5, so never mind.
I did not give Catch Your Breath a 5.
You said you never clarified you didn't.
Did I not clarify?
You said it's a 5 for me, technically.
It'll remain a mystery.
But you're at a 4 for Knuckle Puck. I'm at a
4 for Knuckle
4.5.
Puck.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this record. I think I'm finally ready to give that band its roses. As always, the news is brought to you by Shibori Threads, the clothing label of the alternative music scene.
I'm wearing Real Friends today.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice
Yeah,
that.
I love Shibori though.
Shibori, and then directly below them, the
Real
merch
Friends
line
merch.
from Real Friends. Halloween, though.
It is the Halloween stuff.
The news.
Now
For
for
visual
now for audio
watchers.
listeners who are waiting for us to get to something.
Yungblud
Has released new single "Happier" featuring Ollie Sykes of Bring Me the Horizon.
If I could tell you how I feel, I know that you're still hurting too. No, I'm not broken. I'm just sketched up along you, sketched to be happy.
The two last teamed up on Bring Me the Horizon's Obey back in 2020. Yungblud had this to say on the new track. I've almost been conditioned by myself my whole life to be in pain. When I'm in pain, I work better, function better, because I have something to combat. It's dark, but it's all I've ever known. The feeling of happiness is scary because you feel like it's all about to go wrong. I've always felt that. If I'm happy, I get complacent. So it's lost me a lot of opportunity for friendships and relationships in the past. Marcus, with the weight of that statement, how did you feel about this song?
We'll get to it. It's bad that like my mind when he's complaining, like when I'm in pain, I work better. And the first thing my mind jumps to is like a Key and Peele sketch where like it would pull the camera back and they're just wearing like nipple clamps, but they're at their office job and they're just fucking getting their work, just fucking head down, getting shit done.
This might be
getting those fucking files filed.
This might honestly
getting
be
those copies copied.
your greatest aside you've ever had. Just completely going in a different direction.
Just a different direction. Also, nothing makes me want to fucking projectile vomit blood more than when you tell me something Bring Me the Horizon is doing is aging. Fucking 2020, I want to fucking puke, Sam.
It's
Ammo's about to be 5 years old. I'm gonna go to Jersey. I'm gonna do what I've been promising.
It's made worse by the fact that we were getting 4 EPs for Bring Me the Horizon,
Shut up.
and the first one came out in 2020, and the second one has been delayed indefinitely.
Indefinitely delayed.
We were so close.
How do
Yungblud's
I
put out
feel-
4 albums since.
How do I feel about Happier? I don't like it quite as much as Obey, but I do think it's a pretty solid track. And obviously, I'm never going to turn my nose at a Yungblud Ollie Sykes team up, because I think that even just off that one track, it's proven that it works pretty fucking good.
Agreed. I do think this song stands out to me a lot more than recent Yungblud singles do, and not just because Ollie Sykes. I love the instrumental on this. I love the sort of hyper pop energy it has to it.
Yeah.
And I think it connects really well.
It's got a different energy.
And it
for
works
sure.
really well in the context of the lyric video that they put out, which is Ollie and Yungblud all scratched up in anime style, sort of going through the motions. It all just like, it almost reminds me, I feel like we got like similar things from like Corpse or something. Where
Sorta.
I feel like there's like a, obviously there's like an anime aesthetic there.
Right.
And this kind of feels like it's sort of like eating from that same like pool there. I think, honest to God, this has probably been the best Yungblud song I've heard in a minute. And I would probably attune a fair amount of that to the fact that Ollie Sykes is on it, and I am like forever in adoration of that artist. So
Yeah. Kind of crazy that anything Ollie Sykes does pretty deep into their career, I am still fucking like
appointment listening.
just rabid to hear. Yeah.
Absolutely. Alkaline Trio dropped their new single Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs and announced an album of the same name releasing February 23rd. This album will be the band's first in 6 years, and since and it'll be their first since vocalist Matt Skiba was laid off from
I
BLINK-182.
hate how you phrased that.
Additionally, the band announced they're signing to Rise Records. Their last 2 albums were on Epitaph. Skiba had this to say on the new album via Brooklyn Vegan. This apocalypse culture that we live in, without sounding trite, it's the way that we get our information now through social media. There's always been good. There's always been horror. But it feels like the horror hits our doorsteps much quicker these days. It gives people the feeling that things are escalating horribly. They also released a music video that has them playing in a skate park where everybody turns into zombies and attacks them. And it turns out the whole thing, spoiler warning, was just a dream that Matt Skiba was having. Or was it?
It was.
Overall thoughts. What does this have to do with
In all
Key and Peele?
fairness, sometimes things are escalating pretty horribly.
Things do, yeah, but maybe that's the point. It's almost like the way you're fed information now is very different. Like now it's instantaneous, and it comes from every angle, and it comes from every person. Whereas something that was like a major tragedy would be, you'd learn about it on the news the next morning. You know what I mean? Not like in the literal like instant of like in the heart of like exactly when it's like taking, and then it's multiplied by the fact that like everyone also has like their own personal like issues that they're dealing with, and everything is presented as the same level of you know what I mean? It's just
How
like,
do you feel about the song?
I just feel like Matt Skiba and me are like on the same fucking wavelength right now. Like we're like brain
Are
to
you
brain
sure you don't
right
just
now.
like feel bad for him?
Suddenly I'm pissed that I'm not in Blink-182. It's almost like we become one person. You know what I mean?
I don't mind this song. It's weird. A really great example of something video as well that I just warmed up to by the time it was finished.
We were like 20 seconds into this video and you looked miserable.
I was like, I don't think I'm gonna make it.
Like it was crazy for me. It was like a hell of a Shyamalan twist for you to come out of this being like, you know what? Maybe
Not
I
so
do
bad.
kind of like this. I think the video has some opportunities in terms of like just its budgeting and fucking filmography that could have presented the idea in a way that was maybe a little more visceral and fun and exciting and a little less goofy.
I also realized like I like obviously metalcore videos, abandoned building, forest, like all these like rainy place.
You're gonna call out the pop punk fucking emo scene, whatever the fucking Alkaline Trio is a part of.
I guess I'm sure I noticed it in the past, but like, man, it's been a while since I've seen it. Do I realize like how much I just appreciate like a fucking good ass location like that for other genres as well?
Good. And I think technically they're actually playing in like an empty pool, which is a 110%.
Yeah, but they're like skating in it.
Yeah, but that's also 110% another like pop punk staple, right?
Right, but I think it's hand in hand.
Sure. If the pool's empty, you skate in it, and
sure,
that makes a pop punk video. But absolutely. It's in a sense brilliant to game the algorithm in a way that everyone who asks the question, what happened to Matt Skiba the Friday of a new Blink-182 album, has an immediate answer that is a brand new song and video they can check out.
An interview and all these different things. Yeah.
But it's
Brilliant.
also a dangerous game in a sense that you almost put yourself up for unintentional points of comparison where it's like, yes, these are two completely different projects. No, they don't necessarily share a lot in the same vein, but it's like, okay, I have Blink-182, formerly the band that felt like Matt Skiba's core focus, and now he's back in the band that was initially his core focus. So it's like, all right, I've got the new Blink-182 song and I've got the new Alkaline Trio song, and I can tell you which one I'm enjoying a lot more than the other. Like, it's just like you almost sort of set yourself up for failure for that point of comparison. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Poppy has released new single Hard off the upcoming new album Zig, releasing on October 27th. It's the fourth single from the upcoming release following Motorbike, Knockoff, and Church Outfit. Poppy will be supporting Bad Omens in Europe this January on the Concrete Forever International Tour.
I don't know if we've discussed this already or not, or if Poppy's gone into detail, but is the idea that this is essentially like part one of what could be like a double album or considered that, and the second half would be Zag, and it would turn into like the genres would be different or something, which is where like the, you know, you zig, I zag, like you different direction than you would expect.
I think you can almost consider it at two angles. This could very literally be exactly that, and it's only shortened, you know what I mean? Which is to say that Poppy feels like this is an album where she is zigzagging, you know, breaking maybe, you know, where everyone zags, she's zigging, you know what I mean?
Well, wouldn't you be zagging when others are zigging?
Let's not overthink it. Or in theory, I do like the idea that you've presented, which this could be very much the first of two records that could be very stylistically different from one another. Poppy hasn't specified.
Not in tune enough on that, but I am in tune on all of these singles, which have been sometimes like better than the last. Like, I'm so ready for this album.
I think the point of comparison to the last album, Flux, is where Poppy really benefits, because these songs, by comparison, are absolute fucking stone cold classics, where Flux, to me, was an afterthought the moment I finished listening to it, right? So Poppy has definitely feels refocused and back in their bag in a big way.
You could say Flux was the opposite of a flex.
I could. I won't, but I could. I also want to acknowledge
How fucking pissed I am at Europe. What a fucking good tour you fucking assholes are getting. That should have been us. And I trust me, I know we got a fucking Era's great. Icy Stars are great. Fucking Poppy and Bad Omens in one night goes insane.
It is pretty cool. I feel like I remember people being disappointed with this announcement when they initially dropped.
And this is why fucking Europe sucks.
Right, because they don't.
You guys don't deserve that.
Right, you'd get more tours if you appreciated the ones you get. That's a good point. Like, quit your bitching, Europe. You deserve nothing, and you'll get less. Pale Dusk have hit us with new single Rumble featuring Masato with Cold Rain.
We're not stopping till we're all dead.
The track is presented as an anthemic offering calling for the freedom to create authentically and without limit. The band is currently on their first U.S. tour, supporting Polaris alongside Varials and Currents. They're actually playing an hour away from us right now. So as you can tell, we're thrilled to be here recording a podcast.
Especially like insult to injury or like salt to the wound when you listen to this track and watch the video and realize that Pale Dusk are like arguably a top 10 band in this scene at the moment.
Yeah,
and no one's realized it yet, but they're coming to that realization.
I feel like they'd be a really exciting band to see live.
They
I agree
probably
with you.
would be.
The video for this, like every Pale Dust video, is an absolute trip that features a child having some sort of absolute fucking insane fever dream that features Pale Dusk and Masato with Cold Rain, and also flying over the land like a fucking Dragon Ball Z cartoon or some shit.
Lots of cool CG shots, lots of cool like actual filmed on location bits too, just some beautiful scenery, very vibrant video, very, very cool to watch. Also love this feature from Cold Rain.
Love this feature from Cold. This is actually maybe my favorite thing that Cold Rain has done in quite some time, to be honest with you. I like Masato's vocal style within this band's overall like style. I do really love the vibrant colors of this video. I think we need to talk about not just the way this band dresses, but even like thinking back to that Poppy video, like artists in this scene are just starting to dress in ways that are becoming unreplicable by regular people. Like we're starting to wear fits that you just like, you can't mimic or like recreate in a space outside of like the artistic endeavors that these artists are like finding themselves in.
I think it translates so well
Or
to
not being
video, like especially in the case of Pale Dusk, where like, I don't know if I want to be entertained, goddammit.
Yeah, but I think this
So,
should be
like,
their stage dress as well. I feel like we're starting to see a lot of bands that are like extremely fashion forward in a way that the scene has never had. You know what I mean? Like there was a point in time where it felt like fashion forward in a scene was a deep cut V-neck and like some cutoff jeans.
Yes.
And now fashion forward is like Poppy wearing like hockey pads with spikes on them in like a one piece.
I like that that's the equivalent to like giving a Victorian child like a fucking ring pop or something, but like it's like take out Pale Dusk dress now.
Child, a ring pop is such a funny.
I don't
It just
know.
also somehow sounds like the name of like a fucking Fall Out Boy song
Right,
or
right.
something.
But like what I mean is like show like fucking Time Machine, Pale Dusk back to Warped Tour 2009, and their heads are fucking exploding, like they're bleeding from the eyes. They just wouldn't be able to comprehend it.
It felt like a band doing something visually stunning, especially in a fashion sense, used to be a novelty, where now it's almost starting to become an expectation, where a band needs to be very much pushing their aesthetic the same way that they're pushing their music if they want to stand out.
No greater example of that in this scene, in my opinion, than Static Dress.
Absolutely, right? Static Dress almost feels like an amalgamation of what every other band is doing, stuffed into one singular project. Marcos, of course, Static Dress mentioned because they've released Lie Solution Redux featuring Loathe, Bad Lad, and Hill the Sun. The band also surprise dropped Rogue Carpet Disaster Redux Volume 2, which features additional tracks, maybe Oblivion Redux featuring Bodyweb and Ryder Johnson, Sweet live from Barclays Arena, and Cubicle Dialogue I'm Letting Unseen Forces Take the Wheel Redux. The band also embarks on a UK headliner starting November 9th with support from World of Pleasure and Bodyweb.
Pause for a lot of this information because I'm just learning most of it. When the fuck did this band play Barclays Arena? Which I'm pretty sure is where the fucking like Brooklyn Nets play. Like when was this band in a stadium in the States? Or is Barclays Center someplace across the pond?
Is there a Barclays
too?
Center and a Barclays Arena?
There might be.
Let's see if there's a Barclays Arena in the UK. Who did Static Dress tour with over here? Was there a band big enough that they played with?
Nothing nowhere.
I mean, there's a Barclays Arena in Hamburg, Germany, and then Brooklyn, New York.
So it's the German one.
I'm going to type in Barclays Arena Static Dress and find that.
It was Germany.
And we're learning that
It wasn't Germany.
Bring Me the Horizon played the Barclays Arena in Hamburg, Germany on February 25th, 2023 with support from A Day to Remember, Poor Stacy, and Static Dress.
Forgot that whole Bring Me thing happened.
Yeah, it's because it's funny because we get these huge European tour announcements and then they just instantly become an afterthought because obviously we won't be attending any of them.
The other thing I wanted to mention here when I said pause was that we are micro dosing the Bring Me the Horizon experience with this whole Redux stuff happening right now, where like, man, we're just bringing in anyone and everyone at the moment, and I'm fucking loving it.
I mean, in many ways, Bring Me the Horizon is always where you turn to figure out what you should be doing in terms of like being a band who wants to grow in this scene. So it's like,
Here it definitely feels like these features are coming from places of admiration as well. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to put like Hail the Sun and Loathe on the same track. You know what I mean?
This certainly does. This one in particular feels inspired, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like, because Hail the Sun is a band that like I feel like I don't ever see their name pop up in like a feature type thing. So to see them show up on this song and then also show up alongside two other features is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
The video at this point, I think like all Static Dress videos, was directed by Ollie Appleyard, the vocalist. It certainly captures the aesthetic of Static Dress.
It's amazing to watch. You're transported back to like fucking 1994 or something. Like I don't fucking understand how they're able to do this.
The once again, that like you mentioned earlier, Static Dress has absolutely nailed having a strong visual aesthetic. There are a couple of moments in this video in particular where like we hit that guitar chord and we just sit on it while it vibrates. And it's like, I've seen this like a couple of other times this year in other videos, and it's become like my new favorite thing. It just really helps to sell a riff when you like focus in and see like the
like a little bit of a slow-mo shot.
You almost see like the dust coming off of it or something. You know what I mean? It's wild. Marcus, we have one last story this week. Windwalkers have dropped new single Dissipate. Off the upcoming new album, What If I Break, releasing on November 17th. So, last I think we discussed Windwalkers was like the release of like their 2018 or 2019 album. And I think since then they have like a brand new vocalist, sort of a different look. In my head,
Different
without going
sound?
back and listening to that album, I think a different sound as well. And I think it's one that's working really well for them. I think it certainly sort of circles back to the conversation we were having during that Catch Your Breath review, where it's a band who's looking at the scope of artists around them and what's popular and what's work, and they're sort of pulling in a little bit of that and doing a really good job of replicating it themselves, right? I think a song like Dissipate, for me, stands to establish Windwalkers and give them a track that they can really like stick to their name. Like I heard this song, I finished this song, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to develop a little bit more of like of an identity to this band, where I feel like I didn't really even have that after the album that we listened to. And then I will say the visuals on this video are really pretty as well. So it's just the vocalist featured in the video, and it has them singing sort of as the city moves around them. So it's like people racing by them, lights sort of shining, cars sort of like moving.
Very watchable.
There's like a title drop for this video where it's like as soon as like that first riff hits, that just works really well. So it feels like Windwalkers is really a band that's starting to kind of come into themselves now, and I'm excited to see where they go from here, and especially to check out
find
this
out
album.
soon.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's obviously we're getting towards the end of the year, so it's sort of nice to have like these final releases to sort of like tick off on the calendar.
Yeah, and kind of just get a full understanding as to what the end of this year actually does look like. Because October is definitely packed, but November is, it's getting to look less sparse than it has been. I don't know. We'll see.
They're starting to trickle in. Hey, everybody, that's been a week. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Like I said, 5 stars on Apple or Spotify if you enjoyed it. Thumbs up on YouTube. Love you guys. Bye.
Good fucking...